Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here tonight with Bruce McCurdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. And I'd like to welcome the finest and the wisest hockey fans in the world, Bruce. People who listen and read the Cult of Hockey. I talk to them on Twitter every day, and I'm constantly impressed with them. Great conversations. Alrighty, we are going to be talking today about the Oilers' goalie prospects, namely the top three, although we'll mention the other ones as well. The top three being Stuart Skinner and Shane Starrett, and Ilya Konovalov, who played in the KHL last year. Bruce, the interesting thing about the Oilers is this: in a time when the trend in the NHL is to go away from shorter goalies, the Oilers are still one of the teams that are drafting shorter goalies. So Konovalov is 6 feet flat, tall. Olivier Rodrigue, second round pick in 2018, 6'1", and Rodrigue right now is making a strong bid to be the starting goalie on the Canadian U20 World Junior team. They also have Dylan Wells, 6'2", fifth round in 2016. So of their five top goalie prospects, the magic number seems to be about 6'3", and three of the guys are shorter than that. And there's an increasing tendency to go with taller and taller goalies in the draft. I won't get into the stats, but let's just say it's pretty rare now um, for smaller goalies both to be in the NHL and to be drafted into the NHL. So Kevin Woodley, who is the expert on goalies in terms of public commentary, he writes for NHL.com and I think Inside Goalie magazine, if I'm not mistaken.
In Goal Magazine.
In
Yep.
Goal magazine. he said that there still are a number of small goalies doing well, and that the future of the NHL game might favor smaller goalies. So, and his quote is, "The game has never been faster or more dynamic, especially laterally. A weakness for many taller goalies is their lateral movement, which tends to open bigger holes along the ice and under their arms." So he was a little bit more bullish on these smaller goalies than the typically seen. So the question is, are the Oilers kind of out to lunch here? Or are they ahead of the curve, Bruce?
Well, I kind of got both ends of the curve covered in the fact they got about three or four gargantuan guys on the roster as well. I mean, they got the two in the NHL right now are massive
They sure are.
fellows, and of course
Mike
our
Smith and
the new guy Mike Smith, who's only 6'5", and then the massive Finn. Koskinen, who's 6'7", and Shane Starrett, we're going to talk about in a minute, who's also 6'5", and Stuart Skinner is also 6'4", I think it is. So it's not like they have no big goalies and they're just throwing their lot entirely behind little guys. But now they sort of have both ends of the spectrum covered. Konovalov, he's an interesting fellow in that he got drafted very, very late. Uh, he's a 98 birthday. Same as Dylan Wells, who was drafted in 2016, and Stuart Skinner was drafted in 2017. They're 98, each 98 birthdays, with Konovalov falling in the middle. Uh, but he's old enough and mature enough now that he's proven himself to a significant degree in the KHL, where he was a star goalie with Lokomotiv Yaroslavl. This past year, playing 45 games with a 189 goals against average and 930 save percentage. I mean, those are great numbers. Mind you, the KHL goalie numbers tend to be very, very good. But for him to do that at basically the age of 20, he turned 21 in the summer. So that was his 20-year-old season. To make a mark like that is pretty darn impressive. So the interesting thing about this player is he's under contract for 2 more years over there with no way out. So what he's not going to do is come over and get in the way of and battle in ice time with Wells and Skinner. What's going to happen is they're going to play out their ELCs two more years each in the Oilers minor league system. Well, Konovalov is parallel net mining in the KHL, and my money in some ways is on him to be come out as the leading candidate in 2 years' time to be a top-notch NHL goal. This guy's a real wild card, but that some of these early numbers for him at at a young age, he could be the real deal.
Rookie of the year says a lot.
Yeah, in the
Not bad.
KHL.
Yeah. And Olivier Rodrigue, of course, gets to go back to junior for another year. He's back in, I think,
Right.
Or
Well,
Drummond.
he won the Alexei Sharapanov Award for the best rookie. That's the New York Rangers draft prospect who died suddenly a number of years
I
ago. They
remember
named
him.
the
Yeah.
award after him, and he won a ton of
That's Konovalov. Yeah.
goalie of the week, goalie of the month, rookie of the month, like he's got like 10 or 12 awards that he won last year. 8, 10, 11 awards that he won last year in the KHL. So it's not like he was a flash in the pan that got hot for a few weeks or something. He had it going on the whole year by the looks of this.
So yeah, Olivier Rodrigue will be going back to Drummondville, where he's had a couple two kind of good to okay years in a row. He didn't really improve. He's been on a pretty good team those 2 years. Doesn't look like his team's going to be that good this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with his numbers.
Lost his job in the playoffs too, eh?
And he did. I think he got injured though,
He got
Bruce.
hurt
Yeah,
and he never really got better. That's what
he
I
got hurt and
understand.
he never really got better, and he did lose his job in the playoffs to an older goalie
Hmm.
who came in on a trade. So we'll see with him. The interesting thing to move over to Wells for a second is he's generally less heralded than these
Hmm.
other goalies, but he at every level he outplayed Stuart Skinner in terms of save percentage last year at both the ECHL and in Bakersfield.
Hmm.
So that's interesting. We don't think of Wells as a real contender necessarily. Like he's the least of the five prospects, I think, on most lists,
Well,
including our list.
it's
And
very,
if he
very, you
gets
could
very
throw a
close,
blanket over all five of them. We got a spade of our list there. I think it's 5 out of 8 or something that are goalies. There's more goalies than skaters, let alone position players. It's just a big mess of goalies that we can't figure out really who is head and shoulders above the rest.
so Wells had a 909 save percentage in Bakersfield, whereas Skinner had 879 in 6
Hmm.
games. And in the ECHL, um, Wells had a 912 save percentage and Skinner had 903. So,
Hmm.
but Skinner is a bigger goalie. I think that made an impression with us, and he did fairly well. He had at least one huge playoff game
He was good
for
in the playoffs.
Bakersfield, and that's kind of pushed him ahead of him a little bit. And like you say, they're all so close. There's little to choose from. If it had been Wells, Bruce, who had that huge game
Hmm.
for Bakersfield in the playoffs, he and Skinner would have changed positions on
Swapped
there.
out, yeah.
Yeah,
And
probably.
Skinner is the younger man by about 10 months, for whatever that's worth. But I mean, when you talk about goalies, you're a few years out in any like. I don't see any scenario where any of these guys, except maybe Starrett, is playing for the Oilers within the next 2 years.
So Starrett signed for one more year, right?
Yes,
Now he's 25, and he had a
yes.
really, really good year in Bakersfield,
Hmm.
except in the playoffs. Man, he did not play well in the playoffs. It kind of came apart for him a couple big games, and
Um,
so
I
nonetheless,
got. I have a contrarian old goalie. I'm going to go to bat for him a little bit. He had a pretty good first round when they beat Colorado. And then he had a great game in game one of the second round series, but it went into 4 overtimes, and it was a huge long game, and he faced close to 70 shots, as I recall. And both teams rested their goalie on game two, which was the very next night. But Starrett never did get his stuff together again after that. He came back and he played poorly 2 games in a row, games 3 and 4, and then they were behind the 8 ball. And it was so he had sort of 2 bad games at a bad time. But there was kind of an underlying reason. I mean, what goalie coming out of the college system is prepared for a 7 period hockey game? And
yeah, and I think
whatever, it got to him.
his save percentage, I think this year was in the top 5 or 6 in the AHL this
Yes,
year. So he was a real top drawer goalie in the AHL.
made the
He
all
had a
rookie team.
fantastic year. Yeah. So really, um, I'm glad that they're not counting on him to be the backup in Edmonton this year.
Hmm.
It is a little bit clogged there with the 3 goalies, but there is the ECHL option for one of them or for 2 of them.
Hmm.
So we'll see. You'd like to see all of them get in about 50 games.
Yeah,
But there's how many games between the 2 teams, the ECHL team in Wichita and Bakersfield? There's probably that many
140
games.
games, 68 in Bakersfield. I think Wichita plays a more NHL length season.
So there's lots of opportunities for lots of these guys to get in games. NHL goalies play in the ECHL. They come out of that league. That's not unheard of.
Not at all. It's
Not at all.
fairly common that they play their
Right.
first pro year down in ECHL. I mean, Devin Dubnyk is one example from the Oilers system, who's gone on to become a pretty good NHL goalie now that he's out of Edmonton.
So there should be enough games this coming year. Oh, you're
Yes.
ruining the Dubnik thing here, are you, Bruce? Let's not get
Well,
over past.
yeah. Well, but I'm just saying his class was start in the ECHL and work up, and he's worked his way up to pretty good. But and it's not it's like a lot of skaters. You look at them and you say ECHL, yeah, no, he's probably not going to make it. But goalies, that's not that kind of a stain on their record.
Everything was trending great until Craig McTavish said, "Yeah, I don't know if he's
You got to ask the question.
If you got to ask the question, is
Wonder
that where that came from?"
That's what he said about Devin Dubnyk. If you have to ask the question, and then all the media started asking questions after that. So now we've got, of course, Craig McTavish as the head coach of our man Ilya Konovalov in Yaroslavl.
Well, there should be
he better not be asking too many questions about their star 20-year-old goalie in Yaroslavl.
So Skinner is a great big guy. It looks good in the net. It's just there's so little to. Statistically, he did have the worst numbers of the 3 that were in pro hockey last year: Starrett and Wells, and by quite a bit, honestly. But he's got a lot of promise. He's a fantastic major junior player.
Yeah, his last year of juniors, what's the reason I've got him ranked a little higher on the list than I do Wells is that Skinner really had an extended, very hot run where he was great in WHL in both the regular season and in the playoffs with Swift Current in 17-18.
The Oilers are pretty well positioned. Like if there is an injury, let's say Smith or Koskinen gets hurt, so I mean, it's not like Starrett's. He could arguably challenge for the backup job this year. He's not going to because of contracts.
Right.
But he had a good enough year last year in the AHL. He was a dominant AHL player. That's usually the definition of someone who's ready for a shot at the NHL. I'm glad he's getting another year. Got all these. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of status quo for all these goalies, and we get to see a rerun of how they did of last year, and we'll get more information on each of them. Like if Wells outplays Skinner again this coming year, you'd have to say, well, he's the better prospect. And if neither Wells or Skinner make any headway on Starrett, you'd have to say, well, of course, there's a bit more of an age gap there, 4-year age gap. But you'd have to, if they don't start out playing him, they better start out playing him, or he's gonna be the guy who's gonna be the backup in Edmonton. So there's a good little battle between those 3, and then there's the subplot of these 2 other guys, Rodrigue and Konovalov, in the other leagues, and see, if Konovalov has another big year. Of course, he's there 2 years, as you say, so that's off the table. But Rodrigue's coming into the scene after this year, and that's when it gets complicated for at least one of those goalies. I think you can have 3 guys giving him playing time, but one of them's going to be kind of out at that point. Well, and it's not going to be probably Rodrigue, who's the young guy.
Who's already signed to a 3-year contract. So no, it's not going to be Rodrigue. As I see it, it's a battle, kind of a stealth battle between Starrett and Mike Smith, both of whom have 1-year contracts. And if Mike Smith has a so-so year and Starrett burns it up in the AHL again for a second year, then next year you could see him penciled in as the number 2 goalie in Edmonton. in which case that clears room for Rodrigue to come into the system as as a third ELC caliber goalie at the minor league level.
I like that, a stealth battle. And that's exactly
Well,
what
they're
he,
in two different leagues, but I mean, you can
yeah.
still say, well, this guy had a good year, and this guy, no, he's not good enough. He's gone. And one of them's probably going to get punted, is what I'm coming up with.
Oh,
But it
definitely.
could be either Smith or Starrett who gets the heave on. And in some scenarios, they both do. But it's, Starrett wins the job. Mike Smith is a 37-year-old guy on a 1-year contract. If Starrett says, I'm NHL caliber goalie and I'm stuck in the AHL, well, he's stuck for 1 more year. And maybe
Yeah.
less than that. I mean, remember Laurent Brossoit got stuck in the AHL while Jonas Gustafsson, the monster, had the backup job in Edmonton, and he was such a miserable fail that Brossoit was up by New Year's. So,
What kind of save percentage do we need to see from Starrett to make at least as good as last year? Essentially, he's got a,
yeah, you want to see, no, he was just under 92% last year, and you want to see the
yeah,
same.
well, it's the same, at least the same. And if he
Yeah.
bumps up, then he's a real contender.
Mm-hmm.
And if he plays well in the playoffs, I mean, that would have been that was the like if he had played well again. If he had played well in the playoffs, he'd be in our top 10 in the prospects.
Yeah. He had a good enough year. I mean, he made the all rookie team in the AHL. So,
Yeah. So that we always judge goalies, don't we? I mean, I do
mm-hmm.
on their playoff performance because they're just so crucial to team success in the playoffs. And if you can't get it done, then well, you can't get it done. You're not an NHL goalie. So maybe this year he'll. This is going to be a pretty stacked Bakersfield team,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully they'll go on a good playoff run again. Wasn't bad this year. Could be better next year. All right, Bruce.
And
Anything
one
else?
last clue, yeah, Konovalov. I've been having trouble with the spelling of Konovalov, Konovalov. But I've realized that he spells his name the same root word as the great Viktor Konovalenko, Russian goalie. Remember him?
60s.
This is a 60s reference, our mandatory 60s sports reference. And he was a regular full-time goalie for the Soviet Union, and he played his league games for Torpedo Gorky. His entire career, 17 years, he played for Torpedo Gorky, and a ton of years in Olympic Games and stuff. He was the Russians' #1 goalie and their main man on their 60, just prior to the Summit Series. But the dominant team that won the gold year after year after year, Viktor Konovalenko was their guy. So maybe it's just he's from a different part of Russia, so he spells the end of his name different, but otherwise he's from the same family as
Okay,
the
Bruce, we are now going to have a competition, you and I, to end this podcast
okay.
without calling up anything on the internet.
Okay.
We are going to name one after the other a top player from the Soviet national team from the 1960s.
Oh boy, Anatoly Firsov. I got Firsov.
Okay, I will go with Vladimir Starshinov.
Oh, nice. Okay, I got Alexander Ragulin, big defender, #5.
Konstantin Loktev.
Ah, very nice. Very nice. Okay, well, I've already. Can I go with my Viktor Konovalenko now, or do I have to
I'll
reveal
give you
that
that.
the
I'll give you that.
60s? Okay.
Veniamin Alexandrov.
Oh, wow. Okay, you're going to win this. You're going to win. You know, the Russians, their national team came to Newfoundland, of all places. They came and they toured Newfoundland, and they played the Newfoundland Amateur Hockey Association teams back when I was in Newfoundland, which put it in the late 60s. And they played St. John's Capitals and beat them 18-1. And they beat the Cornbrook Royals 28-0. I remember that score. And I listened to the game on the radio, completely sold out at St. John's Memorial Stadium. And every time the Russians scored, the PA announcer would say, USSR goal scored by number 18, assisted by number 5 and number 11. He didn't even try to name their names. So that's my excuse for not knowing more of their names.
I've read Tarasov's book.
Oh, yes, of course. Too long since I read it.
One of the great hockey books. If you can get a copy, it's really hard to get a copy. where he talks about all those players and Kuzkin and Davidov and on and on and on. And I think Bobrov was retired by then, Sivalad Bobrov. Um, anyway. All right, Bruce. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. Even as we descended into 60s Russian trivia, that's part of the fun of this podcast. You're never quite sure where it might go.
Yeah, it's probably going to go back to reminiscing about the 60s and 70s, though. Well, probably the 70s, because 60s are before my time. All right. In the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.